Okay. That keeps on going. All right, everyone. How's it going today? Thank you so much for being here. This will be a fun one. First of all, thanks to Beefy for being here as always, for running the sound, or actually running the, I'm running the sound. For running the chat. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm always last minute. I'm texting him like, oh man, can you do today? Because I forgot. Yesterday I had a wisdom tooth removed, so I was a little out of it. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's not something I put on high on my list of fun things to do, but you know, you got to get it done occasionally. So it was just one, so I got off easy. So it was okay. No good drugs, just Advil. Anyway, it's a pretty smooth transition. I'm kind of surprised. All right. So a few things. We've got 2 sales going on. I've got 15 courses for sale. Well, 15 60% off my connecting pentatonic scale. There's 15 available at that price. That's help out the channel. If you want to pick that up, 60% off. That link is right over in the chat. Only 15 available. I will throw that in there right now. Boomski. Here we go. You want to click on that? That is 60% off. Oh, my brother Steve is here. He is here. He's phoning in or watching from Scotland. So thanks, Steve. Thanks for joining in. Yeah. Awesome. I'm so jealous that he's in Scotland. Love him to death. My older brother, Steve. All right. So also we have 50% off my repeated pentatonic licks, blues rock for pentatonic licks course. Thank you so much to everybody who bought that. It has been selling extremely well, and I can't thank you enough. That helps me support doing what I do for a living and being able to do live streams and all sorts of things like that. So I really appreciate that as well. Okay, I'll get to... all right, this can be gonna be a little crazy. I'm sure people are gonna be like, oh, there's so many things missing. And I agree, there are so many guitar players missing from the list. So let's just get a few things out of the way. This is totally for fun. The lists are pretty ridiculous to begin with. We all know that. It's, we're just gonna have some fun here because it's music, not sports, but there are some definitively important things that I think that list of Rolling Stone, which is always ridiculous. I don't find Rolling Stone to be the magazine it was when it first came out or when I was growing up. I think it's just like most magazines, they have to do stuff to just stay online. Used to be really kind of reliable rock and roll magazine and also some political stuff. And now not so much. I don't even read it. But this came out and I thought it'd be fun to talk about it. And when I decided to do this video, I looked up and I saw Rick Beato had just won doing exactly the same thing. So I texted Rick and he would have come on, but he was on his way to a show in Berlin. So we'll have Rick on at some point to do the live feed. But I thought it would be fun because he and I have a very similar list of the people who got left off. So check out Rick's list. Okay, so my parameters. What makes these parameters besides having a fancy, nice guitar in front of me? Okay, impact of who the guitar player, the impact of their playing on guitar players who came after them. People who would largely think of some of the greatest guitar players ever. Now, sometimes for us, it's going to be different than, like, for instance, I will start to get into certain things like guitar players who are some of my favorites of all time, but do they belong on the list in terms of what does greatest mean? Are we talking top 250? Sure. Top 10, top 50? So this is all arbitrary and, like I said, just a lot of fun. Musical ability. I think that's super important. I think since we're all guitar players here, we're going to talk about people who are truly excellent guitar players. And I think some of that can be certainly opinion, of course, right? Like I love The Cure and I love Robert Smith and Paul Thompson and I love the way I've loved their guitar playing. Are they great guitar players? No, but they are great for The Cure. So would I put them in as some of the greatest guitar players ever? Technician-wise, no, but influential-wise, yeah, I love that guitar sound that they came up with. And same thing, Edge is on the list already. I think Edge belongs on the list. Is he a great guitar player as a guitar player? Not in a technical sense, and he would say that too, but he's one of the most innovative guys in the past, easily, well, since the 80s. Instantly recognizable. The influence that you hear in his music or his guitar playing on countless records. If you ever listen to praise and worship music, it's all based upon him, and Coldplay and all those sorts of things. I've stolen a ton of that stuff because it just sounds great sometimes, throwing in those Edge kind of guitar parts. So there is that. And also I want to talk a little bit like longevity. So I could get into a little ageism here because has the person been around long enough to be considered one of the greatest guitar players of all time? There are certainly some of my friends who I think belong on that list. So I'll talk about some of those too. So, all right. So we can talk about some base. I got my list, and then we'll jump in on questions and things. All right, so ones that I found to be sort of outrageous, and this is just kind of funny, once again, completely arbitrary. I mean, Eric Clapton at number 35. I mean, come on, right? David Gilmour at 28. Brian May at 33. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Now I'm going to, all right, I'll do my top 10. This is just off the top of my head. I didn't think about it. Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, Yngwie Malmsteen. I would definitely put Yngwie Malmsteen on that. Of course, did I say Hendrix? I should write this down as I'm saying it. Brian May, and I think I probably just repeated. I'm winging this right now. For me, it's Michael Schenker, Robin Ford, geez, Jakey Lee's on one of my top. He's one of my most the guys who influenced me the most. So there's this list that, that the top 5 was always going to be, in my mind, the people that we expect. And Clapton's not on it. It would be Clapton, Beck, Page, Hendrix, and who's that one guy there? That could be. Is it Stevie? Is it Eddie? Is it, you know what I mean? Like the top 10. I think those are. Insert who you feel like should be on that list that day. Probably Hendrix should always be number 1. I think everybody kind of agrees on that, in my opinion. And it's all about my opinion here right now. So that's what's coming down to. Okay, so let's check out the list. So the glaring omissions to me that would just kind of, and I'll qualify them. All right, so first up, Albert Lee is not on this list. Talk about one of the most influential guitar players of all time. Sort of really... This is, Jason Laughlin and I, my good friend, ran over some of these ideas ahead of time. So Albert Lee not on this list is fairly criminal for all the things that he's played on and the influence that he's had in country guitar is absolutely staggering for us guitar players that he's not on this list. So Albert Lee, crazy. Talking about all the stuff that he's done and he's not on this list. The other, I'm not doing these in particularly any order. And like I said, Rick Beato's list was very similar at times. George Benson. George Benson not being on the list of some of the greatest guitar players, not even the top 250 greatest guitar players of all time. So if you think about George Benson, if you've ever gotten to watch him play, and there's the pop stuff that we all know that made him sort of really famous, but even in there, if you watch live videos of him playing Broadway and Masquerade and all those tunes, when he solos over that stuff, he's astounding. So George Benson not being on this list is absolutely kind of ridiculous. And talk about impact, like he was wildly successful, wildly famous, especially when he went into a bit more of, I would say, like a smoother jazz period, if you want to call it that. But if you listen to the early George Benson, there is no badder guitar player on the planet than George Benson. Just badder jazz guitar player or whatever, this is all. But George Benson not being on that list is sort of criminal. And there are a lot of people on this list that, without going into what our thoughts are, I appreciate they're trying to be inclusive. I appreciate all this sort of stuff. But I think for guitar players, there's a lot of people on this list that you're like, well, were they a great guitar player or were they cool? Okay, so for instance, the people who are on this list, like Thurston Moore and Glenn Branca, from Sonic Youth, and Glenn Branca is a composer, guitar player. I can understand whether I love that kind of guitar playing, but very influential for a whole generation of guitar players, of more the noisy guitar players. So in top 250, I can see why some of these names are on there. And there are a bunch of people on there who are younger in alt bands, and they may be cool bands. I like the music, or I don't like the music, whatever. They write good songs, but are they quality, are they good guitar players? Not really. They're just people who play guitar and maybe in a cool band. Lots of examples of that I really love. Like, I think a lot of the new wavy stuff, like The Cure is, The Cult. I love The Cult. Is Billy Duffy a great soloist? No, but he comes up with great guitar parts, and I love the band, and he's perfect for the band. He wrote the tunes, and so, but is he Eric Johnson? No. So you see what I'm getting at. So, do they belong on the list of the greatest guitar players of all time? And I'll talk about the top 10 and some of the stuff that they've put in there. All right. I'm not looking at the chat. I'm going to look at that after because I know I'll just be completely different. Okay, I'm going to go through my list fairly quickly. John Scofield. Come on. John Scofield, one of the single most influential jazz guitar players, one of the greatest jazz guitar players. Also does funk and blues, played with Miles Davis. Everybody. John Scofield is one of the greatest guitar players of all time. I think any guitar player who knows something about the world or the guitar world will agree with me on that. Neil Schon. I think about how influential a Neil Schon solo is, or how strong, whether you're a Journey fan or not, some of the most memorable guitar solos of all time. Some of the greatest guitar solos. You can sing every Journey solo that goes on. And if you watch him on his page and he's jamming, he's just a great guitar player. So Neil Schon, not on the list. Insane. Tom Schultz from Boston. I know Rick said the same thing, and it's very funny. Like Rick and I had a very similar list, and like I said, a text. I'm like, I'm not copying you. We have the same thoughts. Tom Schultz from Boston, not on the list, and nowhere to be found on the top 250. Boston. His guitar tone alone, the Rockman. He just was Def Leppard's all records was done with Rockman, the early stuff. So Tom Schultz, all those harmony parts, great, amazing stuff. Jimmy Smith, jazz guitar player. I'm glad they had Wes Montgomery on the list. I mean, I think George Benson being off the list was the biggest omission, for sure. But Jimmy Smith, just absolutely a monumental guitar player. Okay, Leo Kottke, he's not on the list. As acoustic guitar players go, he's an influential, legendary guitar player, Leo Kottke. Just go watch any video or any record of Leo Kottke, and you can understand why it's kind of shocking that he's not on there. Now, I know I'm leaving off a lot of people. We'll get more quantitative about people I really would love to see on there, too. Joe Pass. It's unbelievable that Joe Pass is not on there. I'm spacing if Jim Hall is not on there, but Jim Hall should be on there as well. So if you're talking about legendary jazz guitar players, the greatest guitar players of all time, Jim Hall and Joe Pass should be on that list. Rick had brought up the point of like Joe Pass was the guy who kind of invented the cage system in his own way, but just check out Joe Pass, one of the greatest guitar players ever, and should be on this list. I get some more of my personal favorites coming up. Cliff Gallup is not on this list, which is really kind of crazy as well. I don't think Brian Setzer was on the list either, but Cliff Gallup influenced all the rockabilly guys. So Cliff Gallup, Jeff Beck talks about him. I'm talking about one guy who should be on that list for sure. All right, here we start digging into my favorites. Okay, Peter Green, not on the list, the top 250 most influential or the best guitar players of all time. Okay. And there's people whose names I do not want to call out on that list. You're like, okay, so that guy from that indie band or Peter Green, who is more influential or one of the greater guitar players of all time. So we're talking about guitar players, Peter Green's got to be on there. Okay, I'm counting down to some of the other big people. Robin Ford, top 250 guitar players. He's not on the list of the top 250 guitar players. Talk about, once again, one of the most influential guitar players in music or guitar, right? So whether his career he was super famous, but as guitar players go, and in that list there are people who are not as, that Robin is better known than, more well known than, but talk about someone who has influenced a generation. People talk about, bluesy jazz stuff and jazz or blues with a jazz influence. There's really, I'm a fanboy, and I'm friends with Robin, and I've been a fan forever. But who invented that? Who really invented that style? So those are things that are synonymous. You think about a Dumble amp. Who are you thinking about? There's one guy, really. There's the other guy, David Lindley, but the guys, everyone's had that Robin guitar sound. In terms of a super influential from every guitar player of my generation and following, he's really high up there if you're getting out of just straight rock and more into like bluesy jazz stuff. So it's a criminal that he is not on this list. I got to call him and tell him that. Lowell George, Little Feat, did not make this list. Pretty much one of the greatest guitar players. Super influential. Like I said, there's a lot of people I'm going to be leaving off that come to mind, and people will throw in the people they love, like Terry Kath is going to be on there for some people. And so I'm just going through the ones that for me, who I think should really have been on there. So Lowell George, talk about one of the most influential slide guitar players next to Duane Allman, and Derek Trucks is on there, but Sonny Landreth is not on the list. So if you want to talk about one of the most influential and greatest slide players ever to pick up the guitar, it's Sonny Landreth. Never became super popular, still touring. Good friends with Sonny. He's the nicest guy in the world, the humblest guy in the world. On the Crossroads Festival every year, Eric Clapton gives him calls. Mark Knopfler loves his playing. Come on, where's Sonny Landreth on a list of 250 guitar players? All right, so I'm going to my top list. Michael Schenker. Okay, Michael Schenker. Now, he never quite had the huge success in the States, I think, but for me and many, many rock guitar players. You got to remember, Michael Schenker first put out a record with the Scorpions in the early 70s and with UFO. Lots of people were influenced by Michael Schenker, not just me. Kirk Hammett talks about him. Oh, man. Most rock guitar players into hard rock and sort of metal talk about Michael Schenker as being one of their biggest influences. So I'm going to do a video coming up on Michael Schenker and talking about why I love him so much and why he's my favorite rock guitar player beyond Eddie and all these guys. The guy for me, for rock and roll, hard rock, is Michael Schenker. In a similar fashion, Uli John Roth, why isn't he in the top 250? One of the most influential metal guitar players of all time. Metal, Scorpions. Sails of Sharon, Catch Your Train, influenced tons of guitar players like the next guy. Yngwie Malmsteen not being in a list of the top 250 guitar players of all time is absolutely ridiculous. So I always get into trouble with these things when I talk about it. If we go down these lists of things, like, okay, who were the big guys? There's Clapton was, if we're talking rock, all right? So Clapton was sort of first, I would say. Clapton, Hendrix. Now, we're talking the huge guys. I mean, Jeff Beck is in there and all that, but the guys who took the world by storm was Clapton, Hendrix. Who was next? I'm going to jump to Eddie, was the next guy who completely changed the field. Talking rock guys. I know people are going to argue, but Clapton, Hendrix, then Eddie was the next guy. People were like, what is this? That's my feeling, and I'm going to stick with it. Doesn't mean they're my favorite. Jeff Beck is my favorite, so he's in there somewhere. But I'm talking about impact on the community as a whole, was Eddie. So during that shred period post-Eddie, who was the next guy? Talking rock, Yngwie. Everywhere, cover all the magazines. He was the next big guy. Absolutely. So for him to not be on this list, whether you like Yngwie or not, or whether you agree or not, that's what I say. This is my show. So I would say Yngwie not being on this list is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, and this is, Rick had also said this too, Alan Halsworth. For Alan Halsworth not to be on this list is absolutely ridiculous. Every guitar player in the planet that I've ever spoken to who knows of Alan Halsworth is like, yeah, well, that guy was from another planet. Just absolutely, nobody sounds like Halsworth, nobody still does, or anybody sounds like Halsworth, they're trying to sound like Halsworth. He was completely original. There's guys, Bill Connors and people like that who were getting into that thing, but Alan was the guy, on that UK record. First time I heard that. First time I heard the IOU record, Eddie loved him. It just took, if you still watch Alan Halsworth now, he's undeniably one of the greatest guitar players who ever lived. And shocking. Gary Moore is not on this list. How can Gary Moore not be on this list? That is also shocking to me. All right, so now I'm going to go into guys. Let's talk a little about some of the younger people, okay? Because I don't want to seem like it's a bit ageist. There's lots of people who I think are great. Some of them being my friends. I think Mark Lettieri is one of the best guitar players out there. He falls in that category, hugely influential on younger people. Mark's younger than me. With Snarky Puppy and all these bands that are a little bit more, they're younger than me. So sometimes they don't really fall into my listening. I see Mike Stern's name popping up. Yeah, Mike Stern. Absolutely. Man, she's huge fan of Mike Stern. I used to study with Mike. I know Mike. Yeah, he changed my guitar playing. He was one of the guys at the time. It was Robin Ford and Mike Stern. All right, so I'm going to leave. Here's a few people that I've left off the list who, let's discuss this. We can get into arguments. Michael Landau is one of my absolute favorite guitar players of all time. I think he's one of the greatest guitar players ever. Does he fall into the hugely influential category? Outside of guitar players, I don't think so, because he was pretty nameless in terms of doing the session work. So there's people that fall into that category on here for me. He's like a perfect example of that. Like my friend Tim Pierce, amazing guitar player. We've heard him on a million things, but a lot of times we didn't know it was him until later. So I'm trying to put it in here. Like they put Steve Lukather on the list, and I think it's because of Toto. So I'm just trying to be realistic about what I think of all this stuff. But those are two of my favorite. Tim's an amazing guitar player. I realized I was influenced by Tim Pierce's guitar playing before I even knew it was him. Not until like years later and started becoming friendly. I'm like, that's you? Man, I love that guitar solo, so that's kind of fun. Like I said, Mike Landau. I think Madison Cunningham is not to have this be all guys. I think Madison Cunningham, and Jason brought her up, Jason Lachlan. He took me to see her play a few years ago. And I was like, I don't know, new bands. I'm being like, and I was blown away. Amazing, super cool guitar player, great songwriter. And we're even just talking about songwriting and singing. She's a great singer and songwriter, but she's a really great guitar player. Great soloist, I don't know, but super interesting guitar parts, really creative. So I think she's one of the coolest guitar players on the scene at the moment, who's new and younger. Guys who would be on the list for me, Scott Henderson. I think he's one of the greatest guitar players. People that left off the list that a few of my friends brought up that I thought was Jason Lachlan was Hank Garland and Grady Martin, who were the huge country guitar players at the time. So really played on lots of records, influenced a lot of people. Now I think on the list, there's a little bit of, pandering, I guess, or what does that mean? And I think like Rolling Stone can be, it's a list. They're trying to incite people to get upset. So if we go over here, where's my, got this? No, what happened here? There we go. Okay, so now TrueFire, fortunately, summed up the list really easily, really quickly. So we can kind of go through some of these, and I'm not going to pick out who I think shouldn't be on here. I'm not going to do that. But, if we're talking about order here, there's some pretty criminal stuff. Andy Summers, number 50. Come on. Now, Brittany Howard, the Alabama Shakes, really great band, but are we talking guitar playing or band? So we can start to go through this. I'll just point out who I think people that should be higher. I think the first one, you see there's Glenn Branca, and I understand that. Wayne Kramer, yeah, of course. Molly Tuttle, she's amazing. I know there's all these people who are like, what about that? I like Nick Zinner a lot. I like the Yeah Yeahs. I think he's super cool. Like Eric Johnson, 205. Really? I mean, I can't. Vince Gill, 220. Lou Reed. I mean, that's Jerry Reed. Lou Reed's coming up later. Sorry. Okay, like Lightning Hopkins. I get it. I love my Lightning Hopkins and a lot of these other people that start poking up on the list here. Then we start to get into people like, are they the greatest guitar players of all time? I don't know. Like Chrissie Hynde. I think the Pretenders are one of the best bands of all time. I think she's one of the greatest pop singers of all time. I really like the Pretenders. Is she one of the greatest guitar players? So I don't think so. We're going through this. Okay, Tim Henson of Polyphia. And where's the other guy who's just as good? Scotty LePage, right? He should be on there next to him. That falls into they're younger than me. I'm not sure I get it all the time. So there's my age guy thing. But Pat Metheny, 157, absolutely insane. Nice to see Yvette Young in here. She's really, really good. Pete Cozy. I like Pete Cozy a lot. I love that Miles Davis period. My friend John got me into him. So as you go through this, there's some of these names that are going to jump out at us that shouldn't be on the list. And, Liz Phair, she writes great tunes. Is she one of the greatest guitar players? Joe Walsh, 130. There's a lot of these names on here. Steve Vai, does he be 127? I don't think so. All right. So we can go through all this, but if you go to the top 10, TrueFire did this, because of Rolling Stone's page is really janky when you try to scroll through it with all the ads that they have popping up all the time. Makes me a little crazy. Oh, there we go. Are we back here? There we go. Okay. So let's go through the top 10. Dwayne Allman. Yeah, I would put Dwayne in the top 10. Joni Mitchell. Oh, that's a rough one because she is amazing. Just absolutely amazing. That's a rough one. So okay. What can I say about that? B.B. King, absolutely. Nile Rodgers, top 10. Love Nile Rodgers. Top 10, I'm not sure. Sister Rosetta Thorpe. Okay, now, I think they spelled that wrong. It's really amazing if you check out some of the videos of her playing back in I guess it would be the 50s and 60s. I'm not so sure. There's that great video where she's on the train platform performing. She's got the SG. Amazing. Great. Top 10, I don't think so. I know it's all male dominated. I think just because it's been a male dominated instrument for so long. That's all. I was talking to my wife about it. She's like, well, it's because men always play guitar more. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, this would get me into trouble. But I think there are great female guitar players. Madison Cunningham's a great female guitar player. Jennifer Batten's a great guitar player. So I don't try to be sexist about it. I'm just going through the people I think are actually just the best guitar players. All right, Chuck Berry. Hugely influential. Do I think he should be in the top 10? I don't think so. I think you should have someone like Eric Clapton right there. And where, Sister Rosetta Tharpe is, I would say there's got to be like a Stevie Ray Vaughan right in there. And Nile Rodgers, I don't know. I would put a David Gilmour up there. Right? And I would put an Alan Holdsworth if we're talking about guitar. Or certainly... George Benson. There's a lot of these names that I would throw in there. Now, one person who's on the list, who's not on the list, who I think is kind of criminal, and I want to talk about David Grissom, who is I had one of my really good friends. Now, if you're not familiar with David's playing, which I think a lot of us are, the coolest thing about David, and this happened on one time I was talking to him, I'd heard a song on Sirius satellite radio, some sort of alt country Americana thing. And I said, hey, man, is that you on that record? He's like, no. I'm like, oh, man. So if you listen to David's guitar playing and you listen to the people who came after him, especially records coming out of Nashville, that he was heavily borrowed from. So for me, on my list, he's one of those people that goes on there. For sure. Okay, people I'm clearly missing. Guthrie Govan's absolutely amazing guitar player. So I'm just falling into the category of people that are super influential, been around for a period of time. Is Guthrie super influential? Maybe to other people, not so much for me. So this is where these lists are just ridiculous, of course, ultimately. But I thought we'd have some fun talking about this. And, there's all sorts of reasons why Rolling Stone does these things. It gets people to talk about them and all that. So I get it. You know what I mean? I get it. All right, so let's take up some questions here. Okay. There's no coincidence you're holding a DGT yet. Well, sure. All right, let's go through the list. If we got anything, we got any questions. First of all, hi to everybody. Right, okay, I'm going to throw out a few names that people brought up that I'm just going to read through this pretty randomly. All right. Adrian Belew is on the list, which is totally cool. I thought that was really cool that Belew made it to the list because he's really great. Okay, like Marty Friedman from Megadeth, a completely original sounding guitar player for sure. Andy Timmons, great guitar player. Should he be on the list? Sure, absolutely. One of the best 250 greatest guitar players. Andy's on the list of some of the greatest guitar players out there. Absolutely. In terms of, it falls into some of the category, like I was saying before, of like more popular to the general public of guitar players. But Andy should be, a bunch of my friends should be on this. My friend Pat Bergeson, who's I've known since high school, is one of the greatest guitar players I've ever encountered in my life. He should be on that list, but Hello, man. Thank you so much for the top chat. I appreciate it. For the channel and being a cool teacher back at the NGSW. Wow, it was a long time ago. Thanks. All right, going through here. There, Cromwell, everybody's in here. All right, let me go. What a stupid list. Yeah, totally. What kind of divided by 13? EDT 1329. It's really cool. KT66 style amp. It's really amazing. All right, I'm not using I have a program where I can bring the quotes up on the screen. I run through some software to run the microphone, and it gives me a delay. It's kind of annoying because my voice isn't matched up with my lips. It's about a few seconds behind. It makes me crazy when I watch it on the replay. All right, Les Paul was on the list, so I was really happy that he was on there. Right, Oz Noy. Oz is amazing. Okay, Alvin Lee. Yeah, right? Someone just threw an Alvin Lee. I didn't think about Alvin Lee. It was Chris Butler. Alvin Lee, absolutely. Oh, you said Alvin or Albert Lee, but definitely Albert Lee. Alvin Lee for sure. For sure. All right. Right, David Allman said, check out George Benson's playing on Billy's Bounce. Absolutely. The first Cookin' with George Benson, those early records are just ridiculous. Danny Gatton. Okay, yeah, Danny Gatton should have been on the list. I left him out. Yeah, absolutely. I said Gary Moore. They didn't put Kenny Burrell on the list. Now, we start falling into those things of like, Kenny Burrell should really be on there. All right, yes, I left out Al Di Meola. Yeah. Okay, I forgot that one. Al Di Meola should be on the list. Peter Green is on the list. I think I missed it. Al Di Meola not on the list is crazy. All right. Let's see. What I like this. What is excluded? What excluded is the list is impressive in its own. Like what's left out. Paco de Lucia, right? So these are all these bands that are coming to my head now. Robin Trower. He should be on the list too. Page is number 3 or something. Yeah, Richie Blackmore was on the list. Okay, we start getting into the LA metal guys like Dave Malloy. What's good up, Dave? How you doing, man? Yeah, Warren DeMartini, Jakey Lee, George Lynch. Right. For me, those guys, absolutely. Do they fall into that category? I don't know. Maybe not if you're talking Aussie guitar players, which would be Randy Rhoads, who was on the list. I would say he would probably be more influential, but for me, of the Aussie guitar players, it's always been Jakey Lee. I think he was the most, frankly, more interesting. I'll get in trouble for that, I mean, right. Steve Howe being that low. Right. So like I said, all right. Yeah. So Peter Frampton, not on the list. Why not? That is crazy. All right. Brent Mason should be on the list for sure. I got that on the list. Okay, who should be on the list also, of course, would be Brent Mason. I got it here. Tim Pierce, Mike Landau. Boy, there's a whole... And a few that I've forgotten about. Peter Frampton should be on the list. Just for... Frampton comes alive. I mean, think about that. I can also say, they mixed in a few people at once. Like Glenn Tipton and KK Downing. I get it, because at least they gave them, and Dave Murray and Adrian Smith from Iron Maiden. I can see that. Kirk Hammett and James Hetfield. I get it. They just want to put both of them there. The band. I think they're inseparable from the band. So I can see why they did that. Also, like they had the two guys from Skinner, two original guys were on there. Roy Gallagher's on there. Jason Laughlin's in the house. What's up, Jason? Thank you for your help. Ralph Macchio, yes. Love the Beatles, but not McCartney. Now, Jason brought up an excellent point. Maybe you could chime in here, right? What Paul solos did Paul McCartney play on the records? So that we might have attributed to George Harrison. I'm not a Beatles scholar in any way. Yeah, Johnny Winter down low. Now, Nancy Wilson. I love Heart. I really do, especially the early stuff, the rock stuff. What about Howard Leese, right? And I forget the other guitar player's name, but Howard Leese was the guy, and guitar player. I mean, the guy. I mean, he was the guy doing the solos and stuff. So she wrote the tunes. I get it. Right. We talked about Joni Mitchell as pandering Pat Metheny and Robin for her guitar players, as was Mike Landau. So, Joni Mitchell is a genius. There's people throw that term around. She is. Her guitar playing is super influential, and you hear her influence in Madison Cunningham's work. Is it a top 10? I don't think so. Top 10, some of the greatest songwriters, maybe? Sure. Absolutely. Roby Can is on the list. I don't know who Jeff Waters is. I don't know who that is. I don't have a subscription to I haven't had a subscription to any magazines anymore. But that was one I gave up a long time ago. I used to look forward to getting it. If my brother's still alive, I used to get, and I used to look forward to that. Like Guitar Player. I can't really read Guitar Player anymore as well, Johnny Marr, I think he's on the list. Not because he recently signed my book, but I think Johnny Marr is on the list. And he should be. He falls into that kind of, I would say cooler guitar player than Robert Smith, but just really influential, amazing guitar player. Just I love the Smiths, and those guitar parts are so cool. And even just the way he worked the effects and How Soon Is Now, the tremolo thing, like that alone, come on. Like you hear that, you're like, wow, that's so cool. So Johnny Marr, and if you haven't checked it out, he did a thing with over at that pedal show. So check him out. Pisonic, I didn't even know how to pronounce that. Lyle, thanks, man. Hey, Jeff. Listen when you drive, enjoy your noggin. Thanks, man. Thanks for being here. Segovia. Right, of course. Then we're starting to get into classical guitar players, which I really, for me, I just know the big ones are Segovia and John Williams, and then Christopher Perkin, all the names I knew growing up. So I cannot say with any real authoritative thing other than, of course, Segovia, because he was the one who really made it an accepted instrument in the mainstream, for sure. Tommy Tedesco, should he be on that list? Probably. Wes Montgomery's on the list. Yeah, some of these guys you're naming already are on the list. Don't ever go for a drink with Jake Ely. It ends badly. Yeah, he's one of those guys. When you hear him speak, you're like, oh, there's a lot going on there. Billy Gibbons at 102. That was brutal. You know what I mean? You're like, Billy Gibbons, 102. That, to me, was a shocking, ridiculous thing. He should be in the top 20, in my mind, for sure. It's Billy Gibbons. All right, so I'm reading more of the comments here. My brother agrees. That's good to hear. Excellent. George Harrison playing is divine. Absolutely. Harrison's on the list. Okay, Jason said, drive my car and Taxman solos or Paul. I didn't know that. That's great. Absolutely. Okay, cool. Yeah. So when the bass player list is another thing too, I think Adam Jones should be on the list from Tool, I'm assuming that Adam Jones. I love Tool. So sure. Guthrie Govan, like I said, if we're talking about strictly being one of the greatest guitar players, I mean, it's kind of hard to find somebody who is more a guitar player than him. Scotty Moore, I don't think he's on there, right? Vito Bratta, right? Should he be on there? Sure, absolutely. Is Joe Bonamassi's relatively influential? Yeah, okay. I would say, yeah, Joe should be on the list, right? I mean, think about, John Mayer's on the list. You're talking about guys who were really influential in the instrument. You can't get, at the moment, Joe Bonamassa is a huge, huge name. And what he's done for the guitar, right? Names, people, okay, see my friends Joey Landreth and Ariel Posen. Those two guys are great. They don't really sound like anyone. They're doing really well. Two other names that if we're talking about some younger people, like I throw into the Madison Cunningham, Mark Lettieri, that group of people who were just such great players. And then there's my friends in New York who are just amazing guitar players. Like Jason Laughlin is one of the best guitar players I know. My friend Pat Bergeson, I remember down in Nashville, one of the best guitar players I know. Get my friend Corey Congilio, an amazing guitar player. So you see where I'm going. I know I know a lot of great guitar players, like really great, and ones who I would say are better than many, many people on the list. But I'm just trying to throw into some people that would be on there. All right, so Greg Koch, did he make this? Does Greg fall into that category? He falls into it certainly as a player. Don't get me wrong. He should be on there. Sure, of course. In terms of the influential, I think it falls into some of the guys I mentioned, like, then you start getting into the really super guitar nerdy stuff, like Mike Landau, who is one of my favorite guitar players. But in terms of a mass audience of really being up there that people will talk about, like, oh man, Yngwie Malmsteen changed everything. Alan Halsworth changed everything. Albert Lee changed everything. Robin Ford changed everything. George Benson changed everything. Joe Pass changed everything. Neil Schon changed everything. John Scofield changed everything. Tom Schultz changed everything. Cliff Gallup changed everything. None of those guys are on the list. That's my point, really. That the people who kind of changed everything. So there are a lot of guitar players who we love who and that might not have changed everything, but those people across the board, I think a lot of people think changed everything. So someone like Robin, did he change everything for everybody? For most of the guitar players I know, sure. Did Alan Halter change guitar for everybody? He changed a lot. Yeah, so this is my point here. George Benson changed guitar for everybody, whether you know it or not. That's one of those kind of guys. Same thing with John Scofield. Kurt Cobain changed everything. Do I find him to be on the list? He's a cool guitar player. So he falls into the, the Cure sort of thing of like great songwriter, cool guitar player. But was he a great guitar player? I'm not sure. You bring up Tom Bukovac. Yeah, great guitar player. That he was he falls into the Mike Landau category of like just absolutely spectacular, ridiculous guitar player that started to come about that, when they started doing YouTube or doing their own solo records after that business and industry changed a bit. So, Jimmy Herring should be on that list. John Lennon is on the list. I don't think Phil Keaggy made it on there. He should belong there. So this is like I said, these are guitar players we're talking about now. Thoughts on Jason Becker? I mean, geez, he was amazing, and it's terrible. The ALS thing is horrible. But yeah, absolutely. He was amazing. So, I know, like I said, this starts to get totally ridiculous, how these lists are. I understand that this is silly. And I just thought this would be fun to talk about because it's so obviously not really made by necessarily guitar players. It looks something like some of it might have been more music critics than anything, right? So, because some of the names on there are absolutely crazy to me. You're just quantitatively just not a good guitar player, just some person in a band. And you might like the band, but just not that good guitar player. So I'm glad to see like Les Paul made it. Let me just jump back over here again. We can start kind of running through, like I said, Dwayne Allman for sure, but Dickie Betts being way further up than him, I don't know. Jimmy Nolan, James Brown. I love James Brown. I don't know. Okay, Prince, controversial for me, this high up. Prince was the package. Greatest guitar players? Don't know. Great guitar player. Greatest guitar players. Those are my opinions. The guy I like, there's some people okay, John Frusciante, it's cool. I don't get it. I don't really get the Chili Peppers that much anymore anyway. I did on the first few records and then kind of lost it for them. But like I said, David Gilmour at 28, Neil Young at 30. Okay, I love the way Neil Young plays guitar. That's a tough one for me. Like, Rick was saying that Neil Young plays like one note guitar solos, literally. Yeah, but they're really cool. So I don't know. My brother used to crank Rust Never Sleeps all the time growing up. It's some cool stuff. Don't know. Some of the greatest songwriting, for sure. Guys I don't get, fall into category. Never been a big Grateful Dead fan, so Jerry Garcia, I know. Eric Clapton at 35 is criminal. Angus Young, 38, is kind of criminal. Chet Atkins, really he should be higher, for sure. Trying to think about who. Okay, let's take Tom Verlaine. I think there would, as Jason was talking about earlier, there's a lot of people who were really influenced by Tom Verlaine, and I would say someone like Johnny Marr is totally someone who had been influenced by Tom Verlaine in television. So I would say he belongs on the list because I don't think you would have some of the people following, like Thurston Moore is a little bit later than Tom Verlaine, I believe. Johnny Marr. And talking to a few of my friends who were in New York at that time, everybody was really, Tom Verlaine was everybody was into it. John Mayer, I think he belongs on the list. He's a great guitar player. Okay. Carrie Brownstein, Slater Kinney. Really? Does she play guitar? I guess so. Good for her. I mean, I don't care that they're on the list, but I'm thinking we're talking about these things here. Joan Jett. Got nothing against Joan Jett's music, Glad Larry Carlton got on here. Lou Reed, does he play guitar? Influential as a rock musician, absolutely. So I can get myself in that. Like Mark Knopfler, 96 is absolutely insane to me. I like Slayer, I do, but Kerry King is not. Come on. When I get a metal band, like, why isn't Marty Friedman on the list if we're talking about like a real true metal band? Absolutely. Billy Gibbons, like I said, 102. Slash, absolutely. I mean, think about, I'm not a huge Guns N' Roses fan, but that first record, I mean, Slash, big deal, you know? Some great guitar playing on that record. Kelly Johnson, A Girls' School. Now, Robert Quine, if you guys are not familiar, I had actually used to see him in New York all the time. Cool guitar player, definitely out there. Nels Cline, lots of people really love Nels. I've met him a bunch of times, a super nice guy. Experimental. I love that Adrian Ballou got on here. Warren Haynes is great. Steve Howe, way too low. You know, Steve Vai, 127. All right, I can go back through all this, but you get the idea, guys. There's some names in here that I'm kind of, just got to be honest. Happy. Look, nobody cares. It's just all ridiculous. But if we're trying to really talk about guitar players, going up here and Eric Johnson being 205, you know, Andy Summers, 250. I mean, Leslie West, 245. Mississippi Queen alone. Come on. Anyway. All right. I'm just repeating myself at this point. Go back to any more questions. What else we got? And all you guys have any general questions, I'm happy to answer. Just regular old guitar questions. Yeah, Mark Rabeau's on there, man. Skunk Baxter. Okay, yeah, Skunk Baxter's not on the list. Where's Frank Marino? Right, of course. You know what I mean? You know, Roy Clark was great. Larry Carlton's on the list. Bill Frisell. Bill Frisell is on the list, I believe. I just kind of slipped over it. Joe Perry, Brad Whitford. I think they're on there. I think Joe Perry's on there. I don't think Brad Whitford is. Right. Maybe it shouldn't have been the 250 greatest list. It should have been more specific, 250 guitar players we've heard of. Could be. All right. It's pretty funny. John McLaughlin is on the list. I think Rick said he wasn't on the list. Yeah. I think it was hard to make it through. I think one of the problems that was hard to make it through was, I think, like I said earlier, Rolling Stone's website is so annoying. I don't know if you guys tried to scroll through it and all the pop-up ads and you're like, oh, so TrueFire, if you want to get the list here, I'm going to bring it over to TrueFire blog, posted it, and I'll put it in the thing right there. There we go. So you can take a look. It's a little easier. I think there's a few typos in there, but, you know. Okay, so someone put like Marcus King. No Marcus King, madness. So those are a good question. Like, now Marcus King is really great. You know, obviously a great guitar player. Does he belong in the list in the parameters that I've set up of longevity, influence, blah, blah, blah? See, this is where it becomes fairly arbitrary. I think he's great. Jason Shadrick, what's up, man? Yeah, George Benson, right? Absolutely shocking that George Benson is not on the list. Okay, tell me how you're not appalled by Joni Mitchell. Was her master? Okay. Bill, if you dig into Joni Mitchell, it's amazing. The tunings, you just, I love you, Bill, but that's wrong. Joni Mitchell is amazing. So just check her out. Check out the Shadows and Light record with Pat Metheny and Jaco Pastorius. And there's this Court and Spark record with Robin Ford, and I believe Jaco's on that. I can't remember. So, yeah, you definitely want to check out that. She is ridiculous. Right, so there's some of these ones that there's, like I said, the great people that we think should be on a list that didn't. And I think, once again, just to recap, Alan Halsworth, not on the list, absolutely insane. Yngwie Malmsteen, insane. Albert Lee, crazy. George Benson, insane. Joe Pass, crazy. John Scofield, crazy. Peter Green, absolutely insane. Cliff Gallup, crazy, he's not on there. All the ones that we talked about before. Danny Gatton, crazy. Why isn't Danny Gatton on there? I would think, thanks, Bill, for the top chat. Thank you. You know, I think that when you talk about someone like Danny Gatton, there's all these people who were really famous at one point or never really made it through, and then he passed away, and he fell out of people's consciousness, or, like I said, I think this list is not made. It's made by music critics, and I think it's trying to be inclusive in many ways, and I can appreciate that. But there's good. There's good. Good is, I think we kind of know good when we hear it, don't we? Right? I think we just know good when we hear it, and I think that to ignore what's not good for other reasons is absolutely ridiculous. Good is just good. We know good guitar players. There can be our opinions. Well, I don't really like him, but okay, there's plenty of guitar. I'm trying to think of some guitar players who I don't really love as players, but I can say that I know they're great. There's plenty of those guitar players. Like we talked about, I don't want people with, even when you name them. I'm trying to think of a guitar player that people love that I can't, that I just, maybe some more of the shreddy people that people are really into. Maybe I don't really get, okay. For instance, I would say, mention the guys from Polyphia, really cool guitar players. It's really great. I just don't enjoy it. I can listen to it and go, that's really creative. That's really great. That's really innovative. That's amazing. I cannot do that. I see where you're going. If I were 25 years younger, 30, I would probably be digging it or whatever it is. And I get it, but I don't like it. It doesn't appeal to me. It just, it doesn't have the things that I look for in music, like string bending. I talk about boomer bends. There's things about that music that doesn't attract me as a player. So what I'm saying is, but I can say that, man, these guys are really good. Like those guys are great guitar players. All right, anybody want to add something? Stanley Jordan, John Christ. Wow, I haven't heard his name in a long time. Frank Ladd. Okay. Mitchell is a fantastic writer and innovator with tunings, but neither me nor any guitar player I've heard copped anything from her. Right. So this is my point. Like it's more songwriting. You know what I mean? So, and her guitar playing is amazing and innovative, but unless you're going in that route, you see what I'm saying? I'm talking guitar playing. I didn't really fully appreciate her, honestly, until I became friends with Robin. And he's like, oh, what do you think of, you're like Joni, right? And I'm like, I don't really like it. And he's like, what? And he really got on me about it. He's like, no, you got to listen to this. You got to listen to that. So he sat me down and listened to it. So I started to appreciate it a lot more. So I don't think anybody's said that Mitchell is getting dragged. I don't think that he was really dragged. I think people just don't, if you have not spent time listening to her stuff and understanding what is going on, because it can appear, here's the trick about her in my mind. I know the chords are crazy and it changes. If you start getting musically more into it and you analyze what she's doing, it's bonkersly good. It's difficult to play, and it's like one of my favorites for a long time is Chris Whitley. You start to figure out like, oh man, sort of innovative guitar player, all about writing tunings for the songs, writing great tunes. So it's a very specific thing. So as a regular guitar player, if you want to get into Joni Mitchell or say someone like Chris Whitley, you have to get into their tunings, you have to get into the mindset and then the songwriting. And so that to me is a bit different than, someone like, let's say, George Benson, where you hear him play and you're like, man, that's just amazing. Also the thing with Joni is, and say Chris Whitley, I'm always so fascinated by the songs. And then you go that little deeper thing where you're like, oh my gosh, listen to that guitar playing. Wow. And I felt that way when Jason, who's on here, took me to see Madison Cunningham. I could tell from the record, but when I saw her live, I was like, wow, that is some of the coolest guitar playing I've heard in a really long time. And great tunes. So that was really fun. Nick Drake, sure. Start talking into that kind of stuff, Michael Burrell, they did mention Kingfish. He's on that list for sure. It's good. Now you see Jack Pearson's another thing. Absolutely spectacular guitar player, known to guitar players. So does he fall into that Mike Landau list of like, does it get any better than Jack Pearson or Mike Landau or these people? Not really. In terms of talking about the styles that they're playing in, but are they? I'm trying to get to names that might have been more influential along the whole thing. Right. So that makes sense. Yeah, Doc Watson, you should be on the list, of course. Martin Simpson. I used to know Martin real well at the National Guitar Workshop. He used to come to my room every morning because I brought an espresso maker to my room each year, and Martin would be at my door every day. Great guy. We hung out pretty much every morning, every summer for a while. I miss him. He was a ton of fun. Martin Simpson, great. Okay, yeah. Oops, Tommy Emmanuel. I mean, yeah. Is there anybody about any kind of better than Tommy Emmanuel? You think about it, right? I mean, he's one of those guys that it's pretty shocking how good he is. I don't know how guys like can do that. I think there's a chip that they have in their brain that I don't have. I mean, I know I can play. I'm not being falsely modest. I'm a good guitar player, but then there's Tommy Emmanuel. Then there's Tommy Emmanuel. Okay. Richard Thompson was on the list as well. Okay, now we're running. Matteo Mancuso, he should be on there. Matteo Sassado, if we're talking about the newer guys. Just ridiculous guitar players. We went through some of this, but no, Neil Schon was not on the list, which is craziness. All right, so I don't know if we did anything today other than just have a lively discussion and you get to listen to me pontificate about stuff. But I know across the whole board, all my friends were just kind of sending the list to each other. I think it was Jason who, I think you said it, and another friend of mine said exactly the same thing you did, and I sent it to him. He goes, "Yeah, they lost me between 250 and 249. I was out." So it was kind of funny. Who else? Yeah, you said Landreth. You mean Sonny Landreth or Joey Landreth? Big Vente. Okay, now just also to be clear, like, I don't care. There's people on here. I'm happy to see some of the names on here. Good for them. I'm sure they were thrilled to be on the list. But the shocking omissions, for me, the top few, George Benson for sure. Michael Schenker. I listen to Michael Schenker almost probably on a daily basis. I just finally bought a white Flying V because of, I just said, hell with it. I'm going to buy one before I can't play anymore. Yngwie, Halsworth, Robin, George Benson. Those are the ones that, for me, I was just shocked, All right. Younger guys, once again. Mark Lettieri, ridiculous. Just love Mark Lettieri. I've been listening to, no, Scott Henderson is not young anymore, but I've been listening back to Scott Henderson again, as I was so heavily influenced by Scott. Go back and listen to some Scott Henderson, especially, all of it's great. I think some of the tribal tech stuff, Dog Party. I had, my New York accent came out there with Dog, I heard it. The New York accent came out for a second. Dog Party is great. And I was going back and listening to some of the tribal tech stuff. Which one? Well, all of it. He's just so good. To some who's going through. And Michael Landau, you guys know I'm, like I said, a big fan. I got my Landau pedal. Hold on. Here we go. Vemram sent me one. Full disclosure, they sent me one. Because I'm friends with the guys. So everybody's like, did you buy it? No, they sent it to me, okay? But I bought all the other ones. And because I talk about them all the time, I think they finally realized that I've sold a lot of pedals for them. Coming up, which should be fun, is I've talked to my friends over at 30th Street Guitars. My friend Jimmy Archie is going to put together a pedal board. Got some cool companies involved. Got Mono. We're going to do this together with Mono. Some of the companies, and putting together a fancy board finally, because my boards are always thrown together by me, and it'd be nice to have one that's actually wired really well and well done. Mine are always kind of thrown together because I'm always changing out stuff. So we're going to design it, and it's going to be a wet dry rig that can also run mono. So the Goodwood Audio, I'm getting one of their little switcher units so I can run in stereo or dual mono. I can do anything I want. So I like the dual mono thing. The guys from that pedal show, that was super helpful for me. And then the wet dry, so you're running a dry amp and a wet amp. That's really cool. And then for a lot of gigs, I just want to run mono, just because it's just easier. Just plug in, and that's what I'm used to. So there's one pedal board should be able to do all of it. So I'm looking forward to doing that video. And all right, any final thoughts? First of all, thanks again to BV for taking care of everything as always. Thank you so much, man. You're the best. I appreciate it. And course is on sale. My pentatonic repeated blues rock licks. Thank you for everybody making that a very popular course. I hope you guys dig it. And I think it's fun. I think it's a great way to get your chops together in a way that is methodical, super useful, and you're building up your vocabulary at the same time. And I don't know how many have sold of the, at 60% off of the connecting pentatonic scales. And yeah, also I got my merch. Hold on. You guys want below. This all helps support the channel. We got the Brooklyn Blues shirts and mugs and things. You can get all those on the list below on there. It really helps out the channel, helps me continue to do this, send my kid to college and all that. All right, everyone. I really appreciate you being here, hanging out along with this fun and keeping it really civil because, you know, Frank and Bali. Should Frank and Bali be on the list? Of course. Should Zach Wilde be on the list? Yes. Right? I mean, given to us, we're talking about guitar players. Yeah, those guys should be on the list. There's a ton of them that aren't even on the list that should definitely be on the list. All right, everyone. Maybe we should do our own list. We should publish our top 250. I need some new courses. I got them all. Thanks, man. I'm trying to get them out. I'm getting out a course a month right now. So that's some pretty, it's a lot of work. But I appreciate everyone who is picking up the courses. All right, everyone, have a great night. Thank you so much, and I will see you all next week. Beaver will be on next week. And I will hope to have a new video out this weekend. We'll see. All right, everyone. That's it, everybody. Take it easy. Bye-bye.